Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gail Carson, your host for Women in Business, a show that celebrates women and their accomplishments as entrepreneurs or senior managers. As a women business owner for over 5 decades, I take great pride in bringing these interviews to you. I'm also president of the SOB clubs, so if any of you are interested in joining one in your area, please let me know. My guest today is Pamela Bruner. And Pamela is a business coach, author, speaker, and EFT expert, and that's Emotional Freedom Techniques. After removing her own marketing fears to take her business from $375 a month to $1 million in less than 3 years, Pamela specializes in working with conscious entrepreneurs to build 6 and 7-figure businesses by combining strategy with cutting-edge mindset work. She's also the co-author of Tapping into the Ultimate Success book and DVD with Jack Canfield, who is the creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul. Welcome, Pamela.
Oh, thank you, Gil. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I wanted to ask you, why did you become a coach? What were you doing before then, and that led you into being a coach?
I was actually a professional musician. I was a Celtic harpist and singer. And I love to perform, but even more, I love to teach. And I was doing a workshop called Creating Music with Love, Not Fear, which was basically all about how to overcome performance anxiety and bolster your confidence. And I realized that that was my favorite thing to do in the music world. And I thought, there's got to be a way, instead of teaching this workshop 3 times a year at major conferences, that I can do this kind of work all the time, and I didn't even know what it was. And so I started looking and finally found coaching.
Well, that's interesting, going from being a musician to being a coach, and yet you started it by really coaching other musicians. And I'm sure music still has a big part of your life, because you don't just become a Celtic harpist without it staying with you. And I would think it would relax you too in your times when things get overwhelming. But let me ask you, what do you see as the big challenge in the transformational industry? Because that's actually what a coach does. A coach transforms people, and most people don't think about it just like that.
Well, the transformational industry is, I think, it's a force for great change in the world. And as such, it's a beautiful, beautiful industry, and a lot of good gets done through the transformational industry. The challenge in this industry is that one of the problems with selling or marketing transformational work is that one of the things you have to have people overcome is their primal fear of change. And so it's one thing to sell somebody a new purse or a tea kettle. There's no major change that's going to occur in their life with those things. But to sell them that you are going to transform when you do this is to get them to accept, wow, I might have to be a different person. Things are really going to be shaken up in my life. And so even the sales process is a coaching process to get them to really step into possibility. And it's a very, very tricky business. So in the transformational industry, I think that there's not enough understanding of how to do business from a heart-centered place that's also strategic and effective and in alignment with values, and understand this real challenge we have in getting people to transform.
Well, you said that you removed your own marketing fears, and you went from $375 a month to $1 million, which is amazing. So what were some of the things that you were facing when you started your business?
It's funny because generally when you hear somebody skyrocket to the top, it's like they already had this natural talent that they just tapped into. I so was not there.
You're brave to admit it.
Oh, goodness. One of the things I found as I was starting this business is the more I admitted to, the more accessible I became, and the more helpful I could be to others. So I'm pretty much willing to share all my foibles here. And the truth is, I hated marketing and sales. I thought that they were sleazy, that they were underhanded, that they were yucky, and there are certainly people who do them that way. But most people in the transformational industry aren't doing them that way, but they still aren't doing them effectively. There's a middle ground. So when I started this business, I had to overcome my own beliefs about marketing and sales, my own fears about putting myself out there, Plus, I had a fairly severe social anxiety. So, although I could be on stage and that was comfortable because I was performing, I had a lot of trouble walking into a room, whether it was a room of 10 or a room of 200, and introducing myself to people and talking to them and networking. That was very uncomfortable. And I had to use all the tools and skills that I now use with my clients to become comfortable with those processes.
So, what was one of your first big wins, and how did
I
it
kind of like
happen?
to tell people that if I could do this, I know anybody else can because I started there.
So would you consider your first big win getting a book with Jack Canfield, or what was your first really big win?
Actually, there's something before that. It's the first event I ever did because when I decided, okay, I'm going to help transformational entrepreneurs with marketing and sales. I had bought a URL and I barely had a business card, but I knew I had tools to help people over fears. That was what I had done before when I was just trying to be a life coach. Um, and a friend of mine was running a ladies' lunch and learn here in my hometown, and she would get 60 to 80 people in to do a sort of a networking lunch. And I said, this was December. I said, I want to run a workshop in January. Can I talk about my workshop at your lunch and learn? Can I just get up in front of everybody and speak about it? She said, yes. I said, great. How long do I have? Like 10 minutes? She said, 2 minutes. And it was one of the best things that she could have ever done for me because I had to figure out how in 2 minutes to get people interested enough to come to a workshop a month later. And I did. And I put 60 people in that workshop and sold a $300 program to half of the room. And that was totally unexpected. And of course, the next 3 months I didn't make anything. But that win allowed me to say, you know what, I can do this. I just need to keep plugging away and doing this. So it is possible if you sometimes the challenge is hone what you have to do. And that was certainly a challenge.
Well, I'm curious now. What did you say in 2 minutes? Because this is very key. Most people who go to networking events, they get into this whole long story, and people just zone out. So, really, when you get up, you have max 30 seconds. You were lucky that you got 2 minutes. And so, I mean, what did you say? Just give us an example.
Well, I knew I needed to get their attention in a very quick way. And so I used a technique that you may have even seen in other workshops. And it was terrifying to me at the time. I held up a $50 bill and I knew I was going to let it go. And so for me to give away $50 on the spur of the moment was terrifying. But I held up this $50 bill and I said, who wants it? Who wants it? And people were waving their hands and yelling, me, me, me. And finally, after about 15 seconds, a woman jumped up, grabbed it out of my hand and went back and sit down. I said, there you go. She's $50 richer because she took action. A lot of you can't take action in your businesses because you're blocked with fears around marketing and sales. I'm teaching a workshop in January. I'm going to help you overcome that. There's a sign-up sheet at the door. And here's the thing. It's $25. And if at the end of the workshop you don't feel like you got your money's worth, I'll refund your $25. How's that for fair? That was basically what I said in 2 minutes. And the first person to sign up was a woman with a $50 bill. She said, I'm paying for me and my friend.
Oh, fabulous. Well, that's great. That's a great idea. Yes, I've seen it done. I'm not sure always with a $50 bill. I don't know if people are as generous as you are. Usually it's a $20 bill, but that was great. So what led you to Jack?
I love his book, The Success Principles. I think it's one of the best books on success ever written. And I had just published my first book, EFT and Beyond, which is a collection of advanced techniques for EFT and transformation. And I went to his Breakthrough to Success, his week-long workshop, and I was chatting with him on a break because he's very accessible. And I showed him my book. I didn't even have like copies of my book. I had like the demo copy of the book. And he was admiring the book. And, I was too scared to say anything, but the next section of the workshop, he said, okay, on the next break, I want you to go up to someone and make a big ask of them, like ask for something big. And I was not alone in storming the stage. There were 400 people in the room. But I was in the third row and I was like jumping over people. And I was the second person in line to ask Jack. And I said, Jack, I want to write a book with you on EFT and the Success Principles. And he said, well, actually, that book has been started, but the project is stalled. And so here's my private email address. Write me and let's see what we can do. And so it took about 3 or 4 months of going back and forth. He sent me what had been done. And I looked at it and I did my second brave thing. I said, I don't think this is the book we want to write. We can write a more empowering book. Here's my proposal and here's a sample chapter. And he said yes. And so we wrote that book together.
Wow. So was that book different than the demo book that you had brought to him in the first place?
Well, the book that I brought to him in the first place wasn't even a book on the success principles. It's just it was a collaboration book that I had just put together with some other EFTers. But I wanted to write a book specifically on how to help people implement his success principles, because I knew there were people who thought those things were good ideas, but they were blocked, just as many people are with marketing and sales. They were blocked from implementing these great success ideas. And I thought I could help them overcome those blocks. And that's what we do in the book.
That's great. Well, now we know that you've made it because you're in the high, 7 figures. What happened to you when you felt that you had made it? I mean, was there an event? Was there a happening? Was there something that you just woke up and said, "Wow, I can't believe this"? Or what happened?
Actually, the time that I felt like I made it was when I failed and came back and made it a success. So would you like to hear that story?
Absolutely.
I was doing my first big launch. I'd been in business about 15 months, and I was doing this online. I'd gotten a bunch of joint venture partners. I'd done a teleclass like 16 times with all of my joint venture partners. Over and over, I'd done this teleclass. My goal had been to put 50 people into a program. And at the end of those 16 teleclasses, I had 12 people in the program. And it was 6 days till the program was supposed to start. I felt like a complete failure. It's like, what do I do? And a friend of mine said, hey, there's this guy doing these videos and sending them out to people on the internet. Take a look at this. And I thought, I'll bet I can do that. And so I pulled out, it wasn't even an iPhone in those days. I think it was like a flip cam or something like that. And I filmed 4 10-minute videos, and I sent the one out a day to the 2,000 or 3,000 people who had all opted in for all of these teleclasses. And it was good information. It was entertaining. And on the 5th day, I sent an email saying, this is what the program's about, guys. You're in or you're out. And I had 92 people sign up in 24 hours.
Wow.
So I felt like I made it because 6 days before the program, I did not accept defeat. I didn't say, well, you know what, I tried, but it's not going to work. I stepped in and tried something crazy, and it worked.
Well, would you consider that one of your hardest lessons, or are there other hard lessons you can share with our listeners?
Oh, gosh, I've learned so many lessons. It's like, how many ways can you fail? In fact, I like to say I'm one of the best examples that you can grow 7-figure business with many of your neuroses still intact.
Well, it's even more important, I think, how many times do you bounce back? That's the key.
Exactly. No, one of my hardest lessons was actually to learn to be vulnerable. Because as a performer, coming from a performance background, you're always up on stage going, look at me, here's what I do, this is so great. And to learn to say, okay, let me tell you about the mistakes. Let me tell you about when I'm not that comfortable. When somebody comes up and goes, I've got this huge fear, for me to say, wow, I get it because I do too. For me to learn how to do that and be accessible and vulnerable was really challenging. And I would slip it in little ways, and I would find that the response to it, I could see that was one of the biggest transformational tools I could offer, was just my vulnerability. But it was really hard for me to learn. So
do you still feel today that you are vulnerable?
I am both vulnerable because I still sometimes go into the dark place. It's not whether you go into the dark place, it's how fast you get out.
That's so true. People say to me all the time, I don't call it dark place. I call it, people say, don't you ever get depressed? Because I rarely do get depressed. And so I say, well, yeah, I do for maybe 30 seconds, and then I think about all the good things, and I think about, how life is much better when you're happy and you're smiling. So why stay there? And yet there are people that can never seem to get out of what you call the dark place. So what would you say, how did you learn to get out of it? I guess that's the best way to ask you.
Well, one of my main techniques is, as you mentioned, EFT, emotional freedom techniques, which I call tapping. And it's a simple self-administered acupressure technique that's been scientifically proven to calm the amygdala, the fear center of brain, lower the cortisol, the stress hormone levels in the bloodstream. So when we tap, we basically put ourselves into a calmer state so we can think new thoughts. Because it's one thing when you're feeling depressed or you're in the dark place, however you say it, to go, okay, I know I should be grateful, I should look at the good stuff, gosh, it's so hard. But if you can calm